I'm going to start off with the sizzle reel, the video that we put together at the beginning of the campaign this year.
Been a long time coming since I seen your face. I've been everywhere and back trying to replace.
For the astronaut, seeing the Earth rise was an unexpected and electrifying experience.
I'm proud that Spider-Man is the first superhero ambassador for Earth Hour. Earth Hour is a movement that has created massive impact around the world.
Earth Hour isn't just about lights off. It's about people across the world coming together throughout the year to join forces to improve the planet.
The three photographs taken by Bill Anders became an iconic image of the 20th century.
Earth Hour is special because it's a movement where you can take charge. Earth Hour gives you the power to inspire anyone, even if you're just one person.
I'm coming since I seen your face. I've been everywhere and back trying to replace everything that I broke till my feet went numb. Praying like a fool, just shy of a gun.
This year, Earth Hour will launch the world's first crowdfunding and crowdsourcing platform for the planet.
There are great projects from the crowd for the planet happening all over the world.
So you too can become a superhero just like Spider-Man.
And if you haven't yet, you need to get involved.
Imagine what we can do this year with Spider-Man by our side.
Yeah, with you, I can feel again.
Never underestimate your power. Never underestimate what you can do.
So join me and be a superhero.
Use your power at earthhour.org.
Use your power at earthhour.org.
Use your power at earthhour.org.
But as we've just seen and heard, that photograph was actually a group effort. Not just because
Okay, there you go. Nice remix in there with some other video running in the background. It's that kind of professionalism that, yeah. Oh, there it is. Okay, so great to be here. I'm going to start off by talking a bit about, what we're trying to do with Earth Hour, the kind of mass participation side of it, and then get into the crowdfunding and crowdsourcing that we did this year. And I'm going to tell you what we got wrong, and well, actually, I'm going to tell you what other people got wrong, and I'm going to tell you everything that I got right. So this year, Earth Hour, it grew again, and Spider-Man, big part of this. It's 162 countries that we have teams in now. It's all open source, so some of them are run by WWF, but actually in this room right now, there's a person who was running Earth Hour in, where was it? In one of the, what was it called? Pangasinan. In the Philippines, and you started with 3 villages, and it's now how many? 48 towns. So a classic example of how Earth Hour works, open source. Anybody and everybody can use it, build it, and that's how it's grown so big. It's about 7,000 plus cities and towns around the world, and in the hundreds of millions in terms of participation. So I thought I'd get a little bit into kind of what happens a bit on the ground. So it started in Australia, 2007, 8 years ago. This year, Earth Hour in Australia was primarily focused on protection of the Great Barrier Reef. And what it tries to do is capitalize on the fact that you've got millions of people taking part, and they have voice, they have therefore got power, and you're trying to convert the power of people engaging for 1 hour into something bigger. So in this case in Australia, they're currently unbelievably about to build 5 major coal ports inside the Great Barrier Reef, which is kind of devastating, really stupid, and very short term, but will make a few people a lot of money. The campaign in Australia was about that. It was about mobilizing particularly younger people in lobbying the fairly strange government that now runs Australia. In Singapore, it was mainly about energy efficiency But for us also this year, it was about establishing Singapore as Earth Hour's base. So it's kind of important in terms of what strategically we want to do with Earth Hour in the long run. Indonesia, incredible community there. Out of all the countries in the world, it's the one where we see the crowd running it and driving it the most. So there's 2 people in the official team for Earth Hour Indonesia, but then there's hundreds of champions who run Earth Hour teams in different cities. They use Twitter and Line and WhatsApp to organize. The parent company of Earth Hour is WWF. WWF managed to recruit 1.5 million new members off the back of Earth Hour last year, and I'm sure they'll have done better this year. The thing about Indonesia is it's very, very community orientated. So the projects that come off the back of the hour, because an hour is not enough, the projects that come off are driven by what is desired by the people in their own communities. So what's happening in Yogyakarta will be different than what's happening in Bali or anywhere else. So a very kind of, actually probably the most inspirational of all the Earth Hour countries in the world. Just dropping down to India, this has the biggest schools engagement for any Earth Hour country. So 15,000 schools involved in a competition to find the Earth Hour champion school. So that's obviously thousands and thousands more kids, and an incredible way of engaging a new generation in environmental issues where you might not think that might be that important in that country. So what I want to try to sort of show you is this is the power of a kind of relatively disorganized crowd. So what we're trying to work out all the time is how do you bring what is quite fragmented into something a bit more organized. And that's what we were trying to do this year. That's what we call it Earth Hour Blue. I'll get into it in a second. But you can see this activity is happening all over the world, but the core team for Earth Hour is 9 people in Singapore. So big campaign, absolutely no money, and almost no resources. So there's a bit of, this is actually the campaign in Penang in Malaysia. And just to show you some diversity, this is the youth ambassador from Dubai. She's in the Antarctic with Robert Swan, the polar explorer. And the campaign in Dubai was around retrofitting light bulbs. So I'm not trying to give the impression that obviously these are fixing major global issues in one go. It's definitely not doing that. But what it is doing is engaging on a really, really mass level in people's daily lives. And that's unusual. So it's very digital and it's very on the ground in one go. Up there, the Russian campaign this year was about Arctic, about some threatened species, but probably the first out of all the Earth Hour campaigns around the world, Earth Hour Russia, that started to work out how to get the most out of crowd engagement. And what they did was there's a rule in Russia still, even now, which is if you can get 100,000 signatures on a petition into the Russian Duma in 1 month, then your issue will be put up for debate. So they did that 2 years ago, and off the back of that, they managed to get some marine protection legislation through the Russian parliament. I think hopefully this month, they've done it twice. They did it again last year. This month, I think they're going to get through legislation that will protect an area of forest twice the size of France. So you start to see conversion from 1 hour symbolic into really major outcomes. And in fact, for WWF, parent company, last year out of the top 5 biggest outcomes for the organization, 3 were driven by Earth Hour and the crowd behind Earth Hour. So it's quite revolutionary in terms of how the conservation movement is being changed, I guess. So another great thing, for me at least, around Earth Hour is that it isn't driven from the top. And it can't be because we haven't got the competency nor the numbers to do that. It is driven from grassroots up, which is very different from most big global NGO type operations, which are very much either normally North American or European. They're normally top down telling you what to do. Earth Hour is about what you want to do in your community, and hopefully you can just build that up and up and up. It goes the other way, which is kind of interesting. These are a few projects from Africa. This one is the first Earth Hour forest. It started in Uganda. It's small. It's only about 500,000 trees. It will grow to about 1 million trees this year. That is small because it's only 2,700 hectares, and they're clearing 6,000 hectares a month. So, but it started by the community, and it is a project that has a whole load of community work that goes around it to sustain that forest. So it's a great pilot model. The top here is one of the first crowdfunding projects that Earth Hour did. It's incredibly rudimentary, but it's basically to provide these efficient cookers in a city in Madagascar that had been hit by a cyclone. Outcomes are the following. They basically cut the amount of forest that's getting cut down for firewood. They improve health and living quality for the families because the amount of smoke goes down dramatically. They also provide more hot food because they're easier to keep going. So swapping over to Latin America. One thing about Latin America is everyone's really attractive. There is always an exception. So this is Claudia Bahaman at the top, who is particularly attractive, FYI. But so in South America, again, lots of different campaigns. Depends on what country you're in. Argentina last year had a campaign to create Argentina's biggest ever marine protected area, and they did that using photo campaign. So again, sort of crowd engagement. That they sent the photographs to their legislators, and legislators ended up passing a law, and it's a 3.4 million hectare marine protected area. So it's 27 times the size of New York, the biggest one ever in Argentina. In Colombia, again, I point to Claudia. In Colombia, this year's campaign was about the Amazon and about helping communities around the Amazon become more sustainable and effectively fulfill the role of guardians of that incredibly important piece of nature. So trying to leave you the impression that lots of different campaigns, very localized, but some are on really big scale, some are quite small, but it doesn't really matter. We don't care as long as engagement is happening beyond the ad. That's what we're really, really interested in. So the other part of this for us is, as I said, we have no money and we have very few people, but we have created an expertise in how to create reach. And that's kind of interesting when I come onto the crowdfunding and crowdsourcing. The way that we've done it is we've basically built relationships with the big media buyers, and they provide all our ad space, and they help us reach out to other channels to provide ad space. And we also ride off the back of advertising space for companies. So, for example, Durex this year ran a massive campaign around Earth Hour. It's not endorsed by us, but they spent a horrible amount of money on promoting the idea of getting together during Earth Hour. But we're kind of cool with that because that just it increases the reach of the campaign and makes it sexy. Okay, so then getting into media side of stuff. Again, what you have got is almost no control over the message. But what you also have is lots and lots of advocates out there doing lots and lots of different stuff, which then creates a bigger story. And you never really know how that story is going to turn out. You always know that something's going to go slightly wrong, but you also know that there'll be something amazing in there, a gem that will become a global story. So again, it's that kind of how do you think about a crowd without trying to control it? How do you create something that's open source that can bring massive amounts of reach and help the campaign build? So that brings us on to our incredibly ambitious Earth Hour Blue crowdfunding and crowdsourcing platform for the planet. Our dream was to create the first open source crowdfunding, crowdsourcing platform for the planet off the back of our global community of hundreds of millions of people. And we wanted to do this, again, with almost no money and very little investment into it. And we wanted to do it with the best partners and the best people. It is really challenging to do this. And although we have a good track record, especially in terms of crowdsourcing and doing that in different countries, in terms of crowdfunding, this is definitely a first for us. And I think that one of the things that we found as we went through this is that we thought that more people knew what crowdfunding was. And the reality that we walk away with is some very smart people who don't know what crowdfunding was or is still. There is a lot of education that needs to happen around the very basic concept of crowdfunding before you can really break out with this like we were trying to. So even with this incredibly large audience, tough. Big part for us, I mean, we did, actually another big thing for us is, as many times as you read the kind of the ABC of crowdfunding, it's amazing how much you don't follow the ABC of crowdfunding, or the projects that come on board don't follow the ABC of crowdfunding. And obviously the results bear out what happens if you do that. We did obviously follow some very core rules, like everything we built this year was for mobile, and that worked really well, but let's get into this. So I'll start with some of the crowdsourcing. We picked 3 main campaigns to promote globally, and then we tried to support the crowdsourcing campaigns that were happening in different countries, like in Colombia or in Argentina or whatever. Really interesting thing about these is that even if you take a campaign like Save the Reef, this is the Australian campaign that we wanted to promote globally because we think Great Barrier Reef, global icon, people will get behind it. The team in Australia struggled to see the value of getting a global voice, because the one big value for us with the local teams is they understand their own territory, but they then find it difficult to think beyond that. That's just a kind of lesson that we got from crowdsourcing. The next one, Finish with Fins, which is obviously about shark finning. This is a campaign that came out of Hong Kong, not started by WWF or Earth Hour. Has great support base behind it. But what we found with this one was challenges around the clarity of what we were trying to achieve at the end of it. So kind of, they're obvious lessons, but we keep relearning some of this stuff. They're both great campaigns, by the way. I'm being sort of ultra critical for the sake of the audience here. And this other one, We Love Cities, which was originally called the Earth Hour City Challenge, actually went quite well. It's basically trying to find the best city in the world from a sustainability perspective. Not necessarily the most successful one. So Stockholm might be the world's most successful one, but Cape Town won it this year because of what it's planning to do and what it's trying to do and the challenges it's facing with its community. It worked quite well, but again, really hard to get a globally coordinated approach to a global campaign. It's just really hard to do. So I get into the crowdfunding. Now, I said what we wanted to do at the beginning was to have an open source, an open platform, which means that people within the Earth Hour community, whether they belong to WWF or they don't belong to WWF, whether they're part of a city government or they work for a bank or whatever, could put their own crowdfunding project on the platform. And that's where we started. That was the point we started from. And that's still really the dream. That's what I would still love to be able to do, but we couldn't do that. So what we ended up, and I'll tell you why in a sec, but what we ended up with was 20 really good projects from 20 WF teams from around the world. Most of them were very under-resourced, and we ended up as a team here in Singapore having to do a lot of the work around preparing their project. So here's the experience we went through, and if you're going to go through this experience yourselves, please do feel free to give me or Sid a call so that we can save you some pain, because there is quite a lot. First thing, we are a charity. So that means whatever we do has to go through the charity's commission, quite rightfully. And what they demanded of us would be different of what would be demanded of a business. So the level of vetting of the projects, the responsibility for the vetting of the projects, came back on us, which fundamentally kills off a lot of the entrepreneurship, the flexibility, the energy that you need to make crowdfunding work. Because suddenly you're responsible. If something's dodgy about any of those projects, you're responsible. You are literally responsible. So that's why we immediately went back to, okay, we'll do WWF projects in year one because we know they're going to be well run and we know they're going to be, vettable. We know we're going to be able to check out the outcomes. Second thing was we had to get fundraising permits. Normally they're issued for 3 months. We managed to get one for 6 months, which is very, very unusual. But to get to that point meant that Sid essentially became bald. It was really hard work to get through that process. And it wasn't through Charities Commission not wanting to help. It was a process that they'd not been through. They were, in fact, incredibly helpful, but hard work as a charity to do this. The other thing for us is we wanted a white label solution. We didn't want to have a platform that was already running, that already had a brand, that would therefore take away from this idea, the concept of Earth Hour Blue, the idea of this being part of this community. And so we went with Singaporean company Crowdsourcing, who were fantastic and helped us in an incredible way through that journey. But it's a big decision about how we progressed that and the consequences, both good and bad, with that decision. I guess what's this next one, Sid? Resources and insights into crowdfunding campaigns we delivered in-house with the help of Key Street. That's it. So see how involved I was? So this is basically, we're having to go through and do all the don't hide your face in shame, Tina. We're basically having to do all the vetting, all the setting up. This is basically what I was saying before. We had to almost design the projects ourselves. So what you really want with crowdfunding is obviously everyone to go, right, this is my project, I'm going to make it happen, I'm going to film everything, I have to film myself, I'm going to have a marketing plan sitting behind it. That didn't really happen because most of the teams that wanted to put projects on the platform came from countries that didn't have a large area to market to, certainly didn't have the resources to do it, and needed a lot of help. Interesting, when we started the process off, we asked teams from countries, both WWF and non-WWF, if they wanted to get involved. The teams that came back from non-WWF were better resourced. They found more ways in which to tap into the community. They were sort of slightly more driven by the fact that they were able to tap into something big rather than already part of it, if that sort of makes sense. So that was kind of a very interesting lesson. The last one was first time we'd ever asked for money. First time we've gone out to the Earth Hour community and gone, do you want to put some cash into something? And I think this is a really interesting point for us because with crowdfunding, the way that I saw it, and I think the team saw it at the beginning, was this needs to be like an investment. That's crowdfunding. It's part of it. But really, when you're a charity and you start doing this, people still see it as a donation. And this is really back to some of the definitions around crowdfunding and how charities use it and how you might use it as part of Earth Hour. So this is the crowdnomics part. I mean, the white label thing, we ended up completely feeling this was essential to what we were trying to do, and we needed a platform that looked great and that worked well and a team behind it that would help us do it, and that's what we got. So we were pretty happy with that part of it. The biggest lessons we had were really in, I think we underestimated the resource, well, we definitely underestimated the resource that we would require to put in from our side. But, we still got through it. So here's some numbers for you. Donors came in from all over the world, 56 countries, not too bad. The vetting process was painful, but we did manage to get a process in place with the teams. I think, as I said before, we didn't define the difference between crowdfunding and donating, crowd donating, maybe there's a term like that. And our marketing didn't push in that way. So we were restricted because of being a charity around asking for money, and also the country teams didn't want us asking for money and pushing all our marketing towards crowdfunding. And also the people we were getting free advertising space off are happy to put up Earth Hour usual power ad. They're not necessarily happy to put up a Earth Hour crowdfund ad. So lots of lessons there that we learned on the way through. And then the other thing was we could only do it in English. Now, next time round might be Spanish and Chinese, but what that meant was some of the country teams basically took our model and then did their own crowdfunding projects on their own websites in their own language, which immediately kind of watered down the effect of what we were doing. So next steps, I should say that out of all the projects, only one completed. And that was the one in Singapore. So it was in a market where they put energy and effort behind it. The second most successful was Philippines. Again, a market where they put a lot of energy and effort behind it. And most of the countries with very small markets didn't manage to raise a lot of money. Although there are one or two that were, because they were so compelling, did all right. So a lot of lessons learned in that first year. And certainly what I wouldn't want to leave you the impression is that this doesn't work. What I'd say is there's a lot of lessons to be learned. And Earth Hour is like that. You kind of try stuff, and if it works, it's fantastic. If it doesn't, you work out what went wrong and try and do more. So our plan as we go forward is basically complete that first batch of projects. See how we can make those teams complete what they were trying to do. Try and keep the projects updated. Another thing, these guys, take Madagascar team, there's basically 1 or 2 people working on that. They worked so hard to both run Earth Hour and run their projects, trying to get these guys to keep the flow of information back to the person who's donated to them really tough, because they just don't have enough hours in the day. So none of this is criticism of those. I think these guys are incredible and very inspiring people. I think, so going on from that is basically we have to get the fundraising permits again. I think that shouldn't be, touch wood, a problem because it's so well vetted. But we also need to refine the project criteria. So will we accept a project from a team that's got no resource? Probably not, unless it's amazing. Would we look again at how many we've got running at any one time? Probably. Would we say basically if you're going to do this, you have to apply certain stuff that you are definitely going to commit to? Again, probably. So there's a lot of submission criteria we'd look again. We would really love to work out how to get the platform open to the broader Earth Hour community, because we think that's where the opportunity is. But it looks pretty tough to do from multiple levels. And then we have a backlog of projects now, so we want to get that second batch out and done.
What do you see? Will you go on for the next year and take it from the lessons that you got here and do something bigger? Or did you find because of focus more Asia and you didn't really get to many projects out there? Or what is it?
Look, I think, well, 2 things. Firstly, this is my last Earth Hour, so I've been doing it for 8 years, so I'm hanging up my Earth Hour boots from this year. But I think
Is that an announcement?
Ish, if it matters. But I think I still personally believe that the big opportunity here is to be able to open something like this up to a much broader community.
Yeah.
And I think the big lesson I took away, and I think the team took away from this, was it's an educative process. Not enough people know about don't get the idea. Maybe we didn't get the idea strongly enough. Mm-hmm. But it's an incredibly powerful tool to mobilize millions of people to change the world they live in. And that's unusual to have that kind of opportunity out there in front of us. And I think over the next 3 years or so, that's going to explode, and that's amazing. I mean, it's exploding already, but maybe not in this field, though.
That is part.